they have to be subject to criticisms because the public safety issue is a very serious one. If the government is not serious, there is serious concern on behalf of the public. We have home invasions now to the extent, well, we don't know if it's foreigners doing it or local. We don't have any data, we don't have any arrests, we have no prosecution, we have little or no, very little.
And we're not being told,
detection.
yeah, and we're not being told about these new things that we're reading as far as the methods. It seems that a lot of these murders, people hands tied behind their backs and what have you, this is not basically something local. Is this something being influenced from South America or some other part of the region? Why are we not expanding on that and figuring out how do we get to the root of what's taking place? But again, all of this information was told to us that the administration has it. They know who's committing these crimes. As a matter of fact, the incident that Mr. Young was talking about at that Besson Street police station, the report was it was a known leader who went to sign the book, as the case may be, in the station. But they know these individuals. Why make such an announcement as if to tell them, listen, get yourself inside, and when this thing has all the dust has settled, you of course could come back out and ply your criminal trade, as the case may be. Is this a matter of just simply buying time?
It would appear so, but more precisely, the anti-gang legislation gives allowance for the police if they know somebody is an active gang leader or gang member.
Exactly.
To pursue the issue.
Exactly.
Hearing about, we have so many gang leaders, so many gang members. That signifies where you know them. It signifies you have a description of them. It signifies you know their whereabouts, you know where they live. Well, why don't you invoke the anti-gang legislation? So I find it very puzzling, very confusing, and I use the word incompetent. So I don't know how this will play out in the coming elections.
Yeah, I know you weighed in on Dr. Rowley's comments about the police officers hiding in the police station. He's saying that the controversial comments were taken out of context and misunderstood.
I am laughing because that is what the researchers on this subject would call double speak. They do not twist issues. It came out very clearly in the parliament. If I remember the quote, some police stations are closed up or they're locked up. Those are very clear statements. There was any misunderstanding.
Well, let me revisit the statement so we have a clear. It has come to my attention in some districts, in some instances, police officers whose job it is to protect us and secure us, in some districts at night are so afraid of the criminals that they close the police station door, turn off the lights, and be inside there hoping that the criminals don't come at them. This is what we were told by the Prime Minister / head of the National Security Council. Now he's saying that those words were taken out of context. I don't know how much room there is to take anything out of context, but the fact of the matter is this compounds the whole issue that is the administration serious about dealing with this crime situation?
That's why, if the commentators, people like you and other people, their words are like blowing in the wind on these subjects. You write a letter to the editor, you make a comment, and nobody really takes it on seriously, the government particularly. I was thinking maybe need some Californians to start commenting on this thing. What has happened to the mighty chocolates? Oh, what about Gypsy? Oh, what about all the Californians? Can they comment on these things? But coming back to the point itself, if he is the chairman of the National Security Council, and he is saying, just come to my attention, which means he has information that is pertinent to our discussion in the National Security Council, because they're in the council. You would have the Commissioner of Police,
Right, yeah.
head of the Defense Force, the Minister of National Security, and that would be discussed. And Ms. Lola Christopher would give her side of the story, and they would come to a proper conclusion in terms of public safety, that the stations, are they closed? Which ones? Why are they closed? In the National Security Council, and come up with a proper statement to the public. Don't keep it a secret. But what happens is that the Commissioner of Police replied to Rowley and said, that's not true. That's not true, Mr. Prime Minister. So why was this raised at the National Security Council rather than Mr. Rowley making a statement in Parliament? And the very next day, the Commissioner of Police, as we say in Trinidad, give the Prime Minister a book. It's not so.
Yeah.
Who is lying here? Somebody has to be lying.
Exactly. And all this verbal acrobatics does nothing for us, the people of this country. Now, to add insult to injury, during the debate on the government motion for the 3-month extension, the Minister of National Security weighs in and says that citizens need to report strangers in their area because criminals are looking for new places to hide out. He said that intelligence suggests that criminals are looking for new places where they can lie low. Now that the police is on the move, the criminals are also on the move, and they're looking for places around Trinidad and Tobago where they can hide out to escape the gaze of law enforcement. This is where you definitely, it doesn't add up again. I mean, you made a move. Was it a knee-jerk reaction to call this SOE? Did you gather all the intelligence? Did you have all the information? Did you equip yourself with everything? Who are the players? Who are the individuals that you're targeting? What is the objective? I mean, it seems that, they're reporting to work every day and shifting the goalposts, just not basically to do the job, but to see how best they can appease the public with their statements.
That's what I was saying just now. They make these announcements, and the media itself, every announcement they make, whether it's credible, whether it's redundant, they say the same thing last week, they get very big headlines. Very big headlines. And intelligent commentary on the issue, you see it in page 7 or 8, or even underneath the page. With these big headlines, so they have an escape clause. You can't be City Hall, that's what it means. Because when they reply to you, it's big, 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 very graphic. So, in a position here where we are tied down. We are tied down. Although we have freedom of speech, free press and so on, the dynamics are usually in favor of the government because of the office. So that's another issue. But you have to look at, maybe the press has to look at itself in such statements and bring up credibility, because you have a system now, you hear about Facebook and fact-finding, fact-checking. Maybe our media ought to do some more fact-finding and fact-checking too, and let the public know, as far as they can gather, what the truth is, especially in a case like this, where police stations are closed and so on.
Yeah, but people, you're right. I mean, the media is basically just lapping it up, taking a reply. There seems to be no rebuttals from them as to say, listen, but on such and such date we were told this, on such and such date we were also told that this would be the situation. Nobody seems to be following up on these statements, and they're left there lingering as though it's logic. And that's the thing about it. We are being told these statements, and when you look at it, it's not even a shell of logic. There's absolutely no substance there. We are now being told, according to the Minister of National Security, again, Mr. Hines, that both of the country's hostile Cape-class patrol vessels are now back in service. So, and he goes on to say that the borders were at no time at all porous, it was never open, and this is it. Now, Professor Diosaran, today is the 21st day of the new year. We're already at 22 murders. Are they simply slowing down the inevitable to buy time? It's an election year. What do we, the citizens, what more can we do?
Well, people will say, some people will say, go to the polls. But I am not yet convinced. I am not yet convinced, Mikey, I have to be convinced. I know that's an alternative. That's what the democracy is about. But I am still waiting to be convinced that going to the polls will solve these fundamental problems, especially of public safety, education, and so on. Because we will be like shadow boxing in the same ring, in the same political system we use, where there is no accountability. I have repeated my concern with the fact that in Parliament you have the executive sitting with the legislator. It's not supposed to be so. The legislature should be separate from the executive so as to hold the executive accountable. But when you have the executive, which is supposed to be accountable and answer questions and be sanctioned, sitting together with the authority that is supposed to scrutinize you. Together, you have bodies in Parliament. So that's what concerns me in terms of, is the solution really the ballot box? Yes, but we have to look at these residual concerns about the framework in which we carry the fight. And that's one example. There are other examples, but
But are you saying then that if the government or those parties, the UNC, let's put things in right with it, are you saying that they have not laid out enough policies that is going to deal with this situation? You're not convinced about that as yet? Oh. No, we're talking. We have to talk. We have to have this discussion. We are 22 murders in the 21st day of the new year. Things may have slowed down on the surface, but I believe the inevitable is there. And people are simply just biding time. But what do you say? Tell me, do you believe that they have not laid out a comprehensive policy or plan to arrest this situation that has affected all of us?
Well, that's the public view. The public feels that perhaps they're waiting until they finalize their selection for the candidates, and when the date is fixed, then they will come up with full force and maybe a manifesto with some plans to counter the government policies and so on. But it might be too late. It might be too late because the UNC even doesn't know when is election day. And that's another issue I have commented on. Why don't they propose a fixed election date so they will know in time how to fix up their business? The investors will know that they're coming in a place with an election due in so-and-so date. But it is a puzzle to know why we don't have a fixed election date, so that the opposition, the businessmen, the country will know, well, they have to stay in the country to grow, or everybody must be able to fix up their business. But if you have a guessing game, a lottery, called the election date in a democratic society, this guessing has to stop. There's not uncertainty that doesn't do the public interest.
I agree with you. I agree with you, Professor, 100%. But you have an individual walking around with this date in his back pocket, front pocket, whatever, so much so that he's now handing that date to someone else. You know, I mean, you know, with all due respect, I mean, no one expected, including the UNC, that someone who basically wrote a book from Mason Hall to Whitehall would say, listen, I've had enough and I want to go. Nobody expected. We've had prime ministers in the past and they've all faced the polls. Whether win, lose or draw, they face the polls. Now we have one who is saying, listen, I don't think I'm up to it, but I have someone else that can play my role and in my place.
Well, he has thrown that burden of responsibility, of political responsibility, on the youthful shoulders of Mr. Young. And he has to be careful he doesn't create the impression that he's running away from the responsibility of what happened in the last 9 years. He has to be very careful that he doesn't leave that impression with the public, because you have to come and face the poll as Prime Minister for what has happened in the last 9 years. And if he gives the impression that he's running away, I don't think that will fit very well in his legacy, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, and one could basically say, listen, you know, as much as the climate requires some sort of fresh mandate, someone is saying, listen, I have to get my business fixed up, because one side may be coming in and trying to rush in to serve the people, and you have one who may be there based solely and solely on self-preservation.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So you ask yourself again, what is he running from?
Well, he might be running from his facade business.
Professor, I want to thank you so much again for taking time out and linking with us. It's always insightful. I wish it would have been better with this SOE and what have you, but it's quite clear that this thing was not planned out, it wasn't thought out, and now we have to face the consequences like every other decision that is made via VAPs, unfortunately.
Yes. There are other things, Mikey, but maybe another time.
Another time. We'll have a part 2 to this. Thank you so much again. All the best. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
All right, Mikey.
Thank you so much.
Husqvarna, a global leader in outdoor power equipment.
joining us. Of course, he's doing quite a lot. When you look at the expectations for the economy and financial markets, Mr. Trump inherited a strong U.S. economy, while the global economy has shown some resilience, in fact, a bit unstable. Trump policies are a bit complex and mixed. We're hearing about tariffs, and of course, a lot of things being bandied about. What can we expect? Before we even mention the Dragon gas deal, what can we expect so far? I mean, in the first week, he's done quite a lot.
Well, I think Mr. Trump, what is happening in the world now really reinforces very strongly the old adage that the only constant is change. And governments, countries need to always be looking at the world patterns and anticipating any possibility and planning for any possibility. So that today it is Trump, maybe 2 years ago, there are many people, even 1 year ago, many people who did not expect that this reality could have come to pass, but it was always a possibility, and that possibility is now with us. Already we are seeing President Trump flexing his muscles. He's showing that I'm not just talk, I am action. And from the very get-go, he has started to make good on the promises and the pledges that he in fact made. And already the world is reeling from it. He certainly sent a very strong message that I am not really interested in what WTO trading arrangements are, what the rules governing global trade is. I am the United States, and therefore whatever tool and mechanism is available to me in order to do that. And we see that reflected in his measure with respect to Colombia, where he sought to deport what he termed gangsters back to Colombia, and the Colombian government said, well, no, we're not taking it. And his immediate response was, well, I'm going to slap on some serious tariffs. And for people who may not, dear listeners who don't understand that, what that simply meant is that by that decision, you sell a lot of goods and services to the United States. If you do not accept these deportees, if you do not accept your criminal element back into your country, then I'm going to make it very difficult for your legitimate businesses to be able to sell goods and services into the United States, because I'm going to make it more expensive. So I'm going to slap on a 25% on whatever you are exporting into the United States, which will make it cost prohibitive unless the Colombian government retracted their position and basically bowed their heads to the will of Mr. Trump. That is something like that is only going to give him a stronger sense that he can do whatever he chooses to do, and therefore all other countries have to be very aware that this kind of approach is going to continue, and they simply have to follow suit unless they can be in a position to do different. We are seeing with Canada, for example, things that are exported from Canada, including energy, that is important to the United States market, and we have heard the Canadian government say, well, we will retaliate if you slap tariffs onto our exports. We will then slap tariffs onto the things that the United States are selling into Canada.
Yeah.
But to what extent can Canada do that? Because it all depends on the extent to which it is dependent on that U.S. market. Because to do that, the repercussions on the Canadian industry could be so significant that they may not be able to afford to do that. And so and that's Canada. So what about Trinidad and Tobago or St. Vincent or some of one of these small islands in the region? We don't have really any grounds on which to be able to stand up to measures like these that a Trump administration can levy on us.
Well, I think it was crystal clear today. Today was the first White House press briefing since Mr. Trump took office. And the press secretary made it quite clear that he has been given a mandate by the people who voted for him, and these are the results that the people of the United States expect. When we go to the polls, however, we expect an administration that is going to elevate the lives of the citizenry, that is going to look out for our interests. But we've seen so many things played out in this whole political drama here in Trinidad and Tobago. Just taking you back to May 2018, the finance minister, Mr. Imbert, in delivering the mid-year budget review said, and I quote, "The economy is turning around. In fact, it has turned around. Revenue collection is up, the non-oil sector is growing, and the energy sector is booming." We, however, have not been living that reality. And so it makes you wonder. I mean, Mr. Trump is doing what he has to do. Again, he has his mandate. He was given that by the majority. People said this is what we want. But here in Trinidad and Tobago, our politics seems to be playing out a lot differently. I mean, coming out of COVID, we basically have an economy that has passed the stage of stagnation. So where do we go, and what does this all mean when things are shifting and changing around us?
And you don't want to talk about the dragon, but really you've really brought the dragon into the conversation, because we are talking about a Trump administration in play, and we're talking about Trinidad and Tobago and the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. And you are correct, the economy is not in a good place. Yes, while we have had a smidget of growth in this last fiscal year, that growth has come largely as a consequence of growth in the non-energy sector, but not any parts of the non-energy sector that is value added, but rather in those parts of the non-energy sector, the trade and distribution sector, which means that we have continued to be really good at buying from the rest of the world and selling to ourselves.
Right.
And we know that we have a serious foreign exchange crisis. And these sectors that are growing are not the sectors that are generating foreign exchange. You know, within the non-energy sector, the only sector that is really growing is food and beverage. Other than that, by and large, it is really the retail and the distribution sectors that are growing. And we see that is reflected in most of our conglomerate, most of what our mega companies in Trinidad and Tobago are more or less distributorships in structure. You know, importation of vehicles, importation of medicine, importation of food. Almost all of these things, they have different arms that are primarily in the business of importing and selling to us. And then when we look at the energy sector, in fact, since 2013, the energy sector has been on the decline because the country has been faced continuously with a shortage of natural gas. We simply do not and continue not to have the amount of natural gas that is required to maintain the demand of the existing petrochemical industries of the LNG sector, and therefore to meet the demands of our export markets. We simply have not had it. In fact, we are currently producing less than half of what we were producing at peak in about 2011. That is the reality that Trinidad and Tobago faces, which has meant that, I mean, in such a situation, you're left to do one of several things. You find ways in order to maintain that sector and find ways in which it could continue to survive. Or you diversify your economic base and your foreign exchange earning capacity, or you do a combination of both. In Trinidad and Tobago, we have unfortunately mostly done the first thing, which is to prolong the life of the energy sector. And the mechanism that the government has offered to us has been the bringing gas from Venezuela through the Dragon and I think it's the Mannequin, through those projects. Yeah. Right? And I mean, until very recently, that is what dominated the national conversation that was that was put out there by the government.
Yeah,
That's what we're hearing, but that's in trouble given the current administration in the United States.
Well, exactly. Now, when you talk about options, again, I mean, things have changed. You have the new U.S. Secretary of State, which is Mr. Marco Rubio, who has made it quite clear that the United States does not even recognize Venezuela's government heads. He said the country is being run by a narcotic organization, I mean, there's a bounty on the president's head. When you talk about options again, I mean, Mr. Trump is looking at those countries who may be leaning too heavily on China. He wants to cut China's expansion route outside, of course, outside of China, what's happening with their policies and their programs. So have we missed out on the fact of not taking a look at the global trends that were happening?
That's where I started, Mikey. That's exactly where I started. An astute government would be looking at where the world is going, looking at what the possibilities in terms of what could be happening in the next 5 to 10 years, and things in place in order to deal with that. If this government had been in fact doing so over the last 9 years, the extent to which we have put all our eggs into the basket of the Dragon deal would not have in fact happened. You know, the OFAC, the license that we have with the United States, it expires in October of 2025. With the Trump administration in play, there is little likelihood that that is going to be extended. What happens to the Dragon deal in that scenario? We are seeing where Chevron, the American giant that was operating in Venezuela, has already said that it is not going to be making any more investments in Venezuela in response to the fact that there is a new player in charge of the American politics. So what is going to happen with the Dragon deal? You know, up to budget, you know, the Prime Minister, the Minister of Energy was telling us, you know, just hold on, hold straight, 2027, everything was going to be all right because, you know, the Dragon would start to dance, gas would flow. But and even then, even if the Democrats had won the election, that date and that timeline was heavily questionable given where we are now and the length of time that is required in order to bring gas to market. But the reality is that they did not factor in what the reality is now, and that is another thing on the internet.
And I think that's what's puzzling, you know, Dr. Sadiwan. That's very puzzling because we are still hearing that our economic wagon is still hitched to this deal, and we're being told in 2027 it's going to bear economic fruit, and we're going to have something to harvest. We're going to have a better economy with things, money that we can use to make life better for the citizens. We are still being sold that dream.
But Mikey, I want to disagree with you because what I have noticed actually is that since President Trump has won the election, our government has really gone silent on the Dragon deal. In fact, what has happened instead is that political machinations is what has now dominated the conversation. We're no longer talking economy. We're no longer talking revenue or forex crisis. All of those things have taken a back seat to what is happening in the political sphere. A prime minister resigning and, you know, choosing the prime minister who will be there in his stead, and possibly going to an election with a variation between the prime minister and the leader of the party. I mean, there's so much thing, the opposition responding to all of that. That is what is occupying the national conversation, and the media is leading the charge, in my view, unfortunately. There's nothing that is reining us in and bringing us back to what is important.
Right, so then where are we going? I mean, and this is something I know many people who are locked on and who are viewing at this point in time are simply trying to keep their head above water. I mean, whatever savings you had is definitely depleted. We're talking about a situation where the middle class has been wiped out. And all we're hearing is dreams, but things are playing out before our very eyes. And I mean, people are able to access information. It just doesn't add up. 2027 doesn't add up. No Dragon gas deal. So what happens in 2027?
But let's not even talk about 2027. Let's talk about 2025. In this moment, there are so many businesses that are closing their doors because they can't continue to function. The rate at which professionals are leaving this country is accelerating. I mean, certainly, Mr. Trump's, President Trump's position with respect to immigration obviously could potentially, you know, put a spoke in that way, but there are so many other parts of the world that our trained professionals can go that I do not see that is going to be a major damper. It may slow things down, but very soon you're going to see people finding other doors through which to enter into other places. And in the meantime, crime continues to go on unabated. I mean, a state of emergency is not a crime strategy. And if you can only boast that the figures are done within this controlled environment where you're giving extended powers to the police, but what happens when you remove it? It does not equate to solving the problem. And we are just about to go into an election, months away, but instead of us talking about these important things and talking about how is this economy going to be dealing, given what we are facing with respect to the potential collapse of the dragon deal. And mind you, Mike, I want to say that if anything can be done or whatever can be done to save it, should be done to save it. Because by all means, we need it. We need it with a desperation that you cannot imagine, because government has failed the country to put us on alternative trajectories. We do not have productive sectors like tourism and all the subsets out of that, like yachting and cruise, etc. We are not seeing growth in these sectors. We are not seeing growth in agriculture and food and the value adding in food production. We are not seeing a manufacturing sector that is buoyant and growing. In fact, what we have seen over the last, within this last couple of years, is many parts of our manufacturing sector actually closing up shop in Trinidad, moving to other countries in the island, and simply maintaining their distribution element in Trinidad and Tobago. We've seen it right with Unilever, we've seen it with Nestle, we have seen it with quite a number of large companies. This is the reality that we face, and we need to engage not just in conversation, but we need to move into developing these strategies to move this country forward beyond just oil and gas.
Now, if it is that these things are not in our sights, and when I say not in our sights, I mean the powers that be do not see how important that we need to look at what's taking place, whether it be with AI technology, whether it be with the entire stock market, the whole global economy. If these things are not in sight and we're not putting anything as far as in place, then how far behind are we going to be left behind when everything is said and done?
We're already left behind. It's not how far will we be left behind. We are already left behind because we are not putting the priority and the emphasis on the things that we need to. And we all people of this country need to take responsibility for that, because we continue to allow politicians to distract us with all sorts of things, and we fail to hold them to account. You see, the administration understands, the American politician understand, when the people give me a mandate, I have to deliver on that mandate. And therefore, from day one, he's delivering on that mandate. That was given. We don't have that here. We hear a lot of talk during the campaign, and then after the campaign, whichever party wins government goes along the business of doing whatever they feel like. The people's voice,
I agree with you 100%, because really and truly, the people must come to the reality that, listen, what you're telling me is not what I'm living. You are telling me, according to Mr. Inwood, we have turned around, the collection is up, the non-oil sector is growing, the energy sector is booming, but that is not what is matching to how we are living. We are simply not there.
Abraham have tried to say that in 2018, but he could not have said that post-COVID, because the energy sector has contracted in every single fiscal year since then. It has contracted. It has not grown, so he cannot say it is booming. It is not booming. The only little upward glitch we had was immediately following the war in Ukraine between Ukraine and Russia, where the price of oil and petrochemicals just skyrocketed, and we had a little benefit from that. Because we were producing more simply because we benefited from the fact that price went up. So no, that is I have not heard Mr. Embe say everything can't. He does in fact say that the non-energy sector is booming. But as I am saying to you, and you don't have to believe Dr. Sajwan, you can go to the review of the economy and you can drill down and you will see for yourself that the parts of the non-energy sector that is growing and booming are not the part that we need to be growing and booming. It's not agriculture. It is not manufacturing. It is not tourism. It is trade and distribution. And I want to really, really emphasize that to people. And, we need to understand that you made the point earlier that the middle class has been wiped out. Right now, the rate of mortgage default is at an all-time high because people simply cannot afford to even have the money to pay their mortgage. That is the reality, and that happens when an economy is not growing, where opportunities for persons to be able to enjoy increased wages and salaries as the economy grows, for them to move up in terms of getting better and better jobs is simply only there for a tiny percentage of the working population of Trinidad and Tobago. Most people have been working on wages and salary that probably predates 2014. And yet since then, inflation as a consequence of COVID, wars, shipping crises, etc., has completely eroded our spending power.
And let me ask you this in a personal capacity. Parents who may have children studying abroad, they're just about ready to graduate. Should they return to the shores of Trinidad and Tobago to seek employment?
I cannot advise them so, because when I look at the job market, I'm not seeing the jobs for them. There is not even the OJTs and that used to be available, where government used to artificially create employment because government simply doesn't have the money to do it. So my advice has to be in this moment, because I am not in government, I am not there, doing what I know is needed in terms of growing the economy. I am an analyst looking on from the outside and seeing what is happening. And what I'm seeing that is happening is that jobs are not being created in this economy. So if I were to say to young people, come back, what am I saying to them to come back to do?
All right.
Jobs are not available. Quality of life is not there. The crime and safety and security is not there. I am a parent with children, and it is a very difficult position that parents are in this moment.
Okay.
I'm a lot of professionals, Mikey, who are in comfortable jobs in this country right now, who are making decisions to leave the country and take a significant cut in pay because they have children and they want to secure their futures.
That was my next scenario. What would you say to that family members who, they have an opportunity to actually leave the country and pursue something in their field abroad?
If I were younger, if I had less of a passion for this country, if I was more just thinking about myself and my own children, I would advise myself the same, Mikey.
Well, what do you say to business owners who may be able to relocate and do their business, online? I mean,
I don't even think I need to advise those businesses, because we've already seen where so many businesses in Trinidad and Tobago have already done that. In fact, Bajans quarrel that most of the businesses in Barbados is owned by Trinidadian businesses. Businessmen are not foolish. Protecting their profits, protecting their money is what they are about doing. And they have already been removing it and taking it elsewhere. We are not seeing the kind of proliferation of business activity, except in the retail area, that we need to be seeing in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah. Final comments? Go right ahead.
My final comments is, as notwithstanding all that I said, I remain the eternal optimist. I believe we in this country have the human resource capacity, we have the know-how, we have the drive, and we have the energy and the love for this country to turn it around. But unfortunately, those who hold the positions of power don't seem to want to create spaces for those who can to be able to do. And unless we get to that point, the transformation that is required in this country will not happen. But we have to continue to hope that at some point in time we can have that kind of scenario taken.
Thank you so much again for dropping by. Always a pleasure to have you on. Keep up the good work, and we'll check in with you periodically. Thank you so much.
worries. Okay, bye.
Take a short break, we'll be right back.
All top quality and affordable.
The Observer. Mickie K, Mickie K, Mickie K, Mickie K.